Hello everyone, and welcome back to this IBM i2 Product Access Management video series. In this video, we will be looking at installing IBM i2 products as PAM enabled. For example, installing them as new installs. However, the process for modifying an existing installation is broadly similar, so keep that in mind as we go through the next steps. So installing IBM i2 applications for Product Access Management enables allows permits to be requested from the server by those products. So for example, Analyst Notebook, you would open up, if it was PAM enabled, would reach out to your license server, say, can I please run? The license server would decide whether a license was available and either give a license to that Analyst Notebook instance or say, no, I'm sorry, you can't run, I don't have enough, or you don't have the appropriate privileges, etc. Okay, so installing i2 applications and enabling PAM requires us to use the MSI exec command on a command line, which is a command which is built into Windows. And then we pass through some additional parameters. So let's have a look at doing that now. So the first thing we're going to do is open up a command line window as an administrator. So I'm going to search for CMD. And then I'm going to run the command prompt as an administrator. When the window loads, the first thing that we need to do is change directory to the location of the MSI file for the application that we wish to PAM enable. So in this case, I'm choosing the directory that contains my Analyst Notebook 910 installation file. So I'm going to go cd /users /PAM user /desktop /cnsl 5ml. Okay. We then need to enter the MSI exec command with the appropriate parameters to enable PAM, which in this case are MSI exec /i for install. We then need to enter quotes because there are spaces between the product installer name, and enter IBM i2 Analysts Notebook 9.msi. And this is the name of the installation file that we are going to install. So if we go into this and look at it in the GUI instead, then you can see that in here we find IBM i2 Analyst Notebook 9.msi. And all this is going to do is essentially do exactly what would happen if we double clicked it, except it's going to do it with an extra command line which we now need to provide. So we have the initial installation file we want to install, but we're also telling it that we wish to do i2lick underscore enabled equals more quotations hash. Oh my goodness, Mac keyboards. #1. There we go. So once we enter this command, the installer will run. And it'll install the application you selected as a PAM enabled product. So you can still choose to do a typical installation or a custom installation and pick the features that you want to be installed. Even though Product Access Management's not listed in the features that you'll see, it is in fact installing as a PAM enabled product. So once the wizard appears, you just go through completely normally like you would just double clicking the MSI file. So you accept the terms of the license agreement, decide where you want to install the product to, decide whether you want a typical or a custom installation. So as I mentioned before, you'll see that there are various options to pick from. And again, don't worry about the fact that PAM is not listed in here as one of them. It is installing it as a PAM enabled product. And then we're going to click install. And this is now going to go away and install our product for us, which in this case is Analyst Notebook 9, with the key difference being that it's going to be an Analyst Notebook 9 PAM enabled product. I've saved you the pain of having to sit through an installation that is quite boring. But now we're at the end and it's completed the installation. So once the installation is complete, you'll see a checkbox in the wizard on the last screen that says Configure Product Access Management Now. You'd never see this checkbox if you hadn't done the i2lick enabled command line stuff that we talked about just now. So leave this checked and then click Finish. Notebook will likely then ask you to restart your system, but we're going to select No for now as you're going to plan to restart later. And then what we'll discover is that the Product Access console will load. If you accidentally did click Yes when you were asked if you wanted to restart, then don't worry. You can always reopen the Product Access Console, or PAC as we call it, by going into the Start menu. So if I close this down, go to Start. And then if we scroll down to IBM i2 Tools, we'll find that the Product Access Console is installed. Okay, so now the product is set up to use PAM, we need to point our installations at our PAM server. So from within the loaded Product Access Console, go ahead and click the Network tab. Depending on your network, you may need to manually provide an address of your PAM server, or it may appear automatically within the Product Access Console. So check to see if your server appears in the list. If your server appears in the list and you see the correct licenses listed, as we do, you should be good to go. However, if the PAM server is not listed, you may need to manually point to your server. So to do so, select the Settings tab. To change these settings, you must first click Change Settings, which will require administrative privileges. When you provide the administrative privileges, will then reload the Product Access Console. And upon doing so, we will then be able to go into the Settings tab, and we will be able to change the settings. Once it's reloaded, enter either the server name or the IP address of your server, and uncheck the checkbox next to Broadcast Enabled and click Save. So I, for example, would enter the name of my box on my network and then press Save. I'm not going to do that here as actually it's working fine for me. So once you've done that and saved the changes, you go back to your Network tab, and then you should find that it actually lists your server properly now. If you're still having issues, the things you need to do will be check your Windows network settings with your admins, your firewalls, and then if you still have no further luck and you don't believe that your network is what's at fault, reach out to us in the IBM i2 product support team, and we'll see what we can do to assist you further. We'll obviously check to see whether we think it's a problem with PAM or whether we still think it's something that's wrong with your Windows network. If all the permits are now listed and pointing to your PAM server correctly, you can then try opening your product. So I'm going to close the Product Access Console. I'm going to go and find Analyst Notebook, and I'm going to open it up. So when Analyst Notebook starts to load, you may find, as I mentioned earlier, that on your splash screen, some text is displayed. This won't appear if you haven't chosen to give any optional text, but you can also see this option text if you then, once the product is loaded, go into the help and about information for your product. So here you can see the splash screen has IBM i2 support team use only, which we put onto our form earlier, displayed. And also, if we go to File and then About Analyst Notebook, we'll also see the IBM i2 support team use only is displayed within the About information, along with some information which is displayed about our license that we're using and what network location we're connected to, all that kind of good stuff. The last thing to mention in this video is a quick note for those of you who are using either terminal services or remote desktop. You may find that when you come to install the PAM components, the Product Access Console is not installed. Please don't panic, as this is expected behavior. The functionality is still there, but the console isn't. If you want to modify the server order list or disable broadcast, like we mentioned before in the video, you'll instead need to manipulate the registry keys which have now been placed onto your machine. To modify the server list, navigate to the server order key found at HKey local machine, software, i2, licensing. Set the value of this key to a comma-separated list of your server names or IP addresses, and this will do the exact same thing as what we did previously in the video in the Product Access Console. Please note that the key must contain no spaces. Similarly, if you want to enable or disable broadcasts, you modify the broadcast enable key found at the same location from either 1 to enable them or 0 to disable them. That's the end of the video series for now, but in the future we'll be looking at covering some of the other features of PAM, such as commuting licenses and reservation groups.